My name is John Myatt. In my time, I've been a teacher, a painter, and an art forger. In 1999, I was jailed for forging over 200 paintings, a crime that rocked the art world, and I paid the price for it. These days, I paint in the style of the great masters and sell them legally as honest fakes. And I've started teaching the tricks of my trade to aspiring artists because all painters can learn by copying others. Today, we'll be painting in the style of an American artist who was the most celebrated portrait painter of his time, John Singer Sargent.
I'm not particularly nervous about it, I'm more excited.
I just hope I don't fiddle too much and wreck it.
Hello and welcome to Middleton Hall here in Staffordshire. Well, in recent times, photographers such as Cecil Beaton, David Bailey, Mario Testino have been commissioned to capture the likeness of the world's wealthy and iconic people. But back at the turn of the 20th century, the great and the good, the rich and the famous were flocking to the studio of John Singer Sargent. Such was his celebrity that people would actually cross the Atlantic just for a chance of a sitting in his studio. Born in Florence in 1856 to wealthy American parents, Sargent created a sensation when he studied painting in Paris with his amazing technical ability. By putting together standard academic practice with bravura paint skills, he was able to put portrait painting right back on the map. To paint a portrait in Sargent's masterful style is a real challenge for even the most skilled artist.
I'm Sally Brooks, I live in Worcestershire and I'm an art teacher.
My name is Gordon Collett, I live near Windsor. I'm a muralist and I specialise in architectural trompe-l'oeil.
I'm Pat Landon, I live near Solihull and I'm an artist and art teacher.
I guess it would be quite interesting to be the students because then I can sympathise with my pupils in the classroom when I'm showing them and demonstrating to them the techniques I want them to do.
I've no idea what's going to be in front and I'm really looking forward to seeing what I can do. It's all going to be new and I've never had an art lesson before. It'll be the first time someone's taught me how to paint.
The subject I'm not looking forward to, if that is what's chosen, probably is a portrait or a figure.
The challenge for anybody today trying to paint in the style of Singer Sargent is actually not to get bogged down with all the detail. Details, he said, would just take care of themselves. Well, make of that what you will. But there were newspaper cartoons of the time showing Sargent attacking his painting with a mop. Such was the gusto with which he worked. Well, I just hope that today's students can take that plunge, find that courage, and work the same way that he did. Pat, Sally, Gordon, today your task is to complete a painting in the style of John Singer Sargent.
Gosh.
Pat, what do you think?
The most beautiful, beautiful painting and a wonderful artist. Yes, it's fantastic, gosh. Very, very clever on the material.
You're looking forward to
like
doing
satin. I am, yes.
A challenge.
Because you were saying you hoped it wasn't Sargent, didn't it? Did I get you right? Or you hoped it wasn't a portrait?
I hoped it wasn't a portrait.
Oh, well.
The style of my work is more abstract, but I shall have a go.
I like it a lot. I'm looking forward to having a go at that.
In a career spanning over 40 years, Sargent painted more than 500 portraits like this one of Nancy Astor. He painted numerous murals, watercolours and landscapes, but he is best known for these stunning records of early 20th century high society. He always drew the attention to the face. You can get away with murder here, in fact, in terms of, handling and brushwork. You can actually afford to keep quite a lot of this very loose, but this is the area where you have to have, this is where the eye is drawn, because she's looking at you, you're looking at her, and this is, if there is any detail, it's there. So I'd leave that towards the end of the painting. I want you to use this colour scheme, definitely, because I think it's a simple colour scheme, a mixture of black, dark burnt umber, and then ochre, yellow ochre, even over the flesh area, really, and then a soft kind of warm red umber glaze around here, and ochres again down here, just heightened quite actually quite abruptly heightened here with white. So it's a really restricted palette. I think that's probably the only red moment in the painting, isn't it? Those lovely lips she's got, they're fantastic. I mean, she's a real corker, isn't she?
I love this artist. I appreciate his work tremendously. Whether I'll be able to emulate it, I've no idea.
I've taught myself painting by copying other people's work, and as I've been going along, my work is getting looser and looser, and just seeing the fabrics and the highlighting, I'm looking forward to seeing how much I actually know about that now.
Portraits I haven't done for a long time. Life drawing I probably haven't touched for 13 odd years. So yes, it'll be a nice challenge for me.
So ladies and gentlemen, here is our Edwardian socialite. Don't forget to tackle this job with flamboyance and gusto. This, after all, is high society. Let's go.
These three may not be high society, but they've certainly taken on a big challenge. I really hope they can rise to the occasion.
Right, just before we start, Pat, Gordon, Sally, I'm going to leave Sargent's painting here just so you can reference the proportions, so you can see how much of the head occupies how much of the canvas, just to give you some idea, okay? First thing is to remember that he used large dollops of paint, large dollops. He put vast quantities of paint, not tiny little bits, and we don't want a wishy-washy kind of thing. We want a lot of paint going on as soon as possible. Keep the centre of the work in an ochreish, get an ochreish kind of hue in the centre, dark towards the edge. He covered the painting, the whole painting surface, very rapidly. And you must do the same. As I said, if you ain't got it covered in 20 minutes' time, I'm going to do it for you.
And I'm not joking.
Could you just, for a moment, darling, could you just throw your head back that way so they can actually see what the neck is doing here? You'll a strong line down here of this muscle. So just hold it for a second. Can you just look at the head, please, everybody? Because that is going to be the final position.
One of the hardest parts of portraiture is getting the proportions right.
Yes, glad to see a few of you doing this. That's well done, Gordon. This business here is quite simply to actually get the proportions. Once you've established the actual size of the head from chin to the top of the head, you then drop this down here like so, and you can make a kind of mark. So 2 heads equals that mark just there. Now, keeping the same measurement there to there takes me to that mark there, quite a useful one. And again, down here to the wrist. So I kind of measured, you see, measured using the head as the standard unit of measure. Sargent would have worked the old-fashioned way. He would have worked from dark to light. So get the darkest tones in. Good start, Pat. Good start. You happy?
Yes, quite.
I think so too, so am I. Happy there, Gordon?
I'm not sure yet. But I'm just getting the stuff in the back.
You're certainly getting it.
You make the figure fill it after I got it around it.
Oh, Sally, that's looking... Really, that's looking quite powerful already, isn't it?
I hope so.
Yes.
What a great start they're all making.
John, is the head too big?
Just a little bit, yeah. It's quite flattering to have the head small on the body anyway, but I think you've got the actual shape of the skull, if you like, right, but you've just taken... If we just lost that... we just put a bit of... If we just lost that there, just took that away...
Yeah.
And then actually establish the shade. The whole of the side of the head is in shade anyway. Yeah. But I would just... You're depending on the outlines at the present moment. It would be quite nice if you actually just blocked this. Right. And then we can jiggle the tones up and down. At the present moment, we're dependent on outlines. Yeah. And while we're shoving outlines around, we're only shooting with one gun instead of, half a dozen. We need to get the tones in. That's why we want those tones in quickly. Because if something is in the wrong place, I can just move a tone to that side or that side, and I can adjust all that.
In art, there are many techniques that can help you with your painting.
One of the very oldest of all academic tricks, and I'm sure you've all seen it, is that you darken the background to the this side of the face because this side of the face is catching the light. So you emphasize, and in this side where there's shade, you lighten the background. Have you seen that? You see it so often in academic painting. It's just an old trick and they always do it.
Sargent was gifted with amazing technical virtuosity from the very beginning, but he applied an adventurous spontaneity to formal academic portraiture to create his own unique style, and was rewarded with instant commercial success. People flocked to his Paris studio to sit for dramatic, flattering, and sometimes provocative portraits.
The only time he ever really had any controversy as such was early days in France with the infamous portrait of Madame X in the strapless dress. And this was considered just a bit too erotic for the time and led to a falling away of his customers in Paris. So he crossed the English Channel and set up shop in London.
I've got a good feeling about today's students. I think they could really capture something of Sargent.
Pat, Gordon, Sally, the time has now come, right? This is the moment when we actually blitz the canvas. And I don't mean the face, I mean the dress. I want you to load the brush with as much paint as you can, a lighter version of that dress that Sarah's wearing, and I want you to attack that canvas in one movement like that. Confident and aggressive. Take a step back before you do it. Let's do it the Sargent way. Take a step back and... Right? We've got plenty of time to put mistakes right, so let's just take a few risks, because this actually is going very well. Is anybody taking a step back and lunging at the painting like a fencer? Haven't seen it yet. Take a step back and lunge. Come on now, that's the stuff. Missed. Take a step back, Pat, and lunge.
I'm taking
and
a step
lunge.
back.
And that's it. Whoosh. That's the one. Step back and lunge. This is what excited all his customers. They loved it. It was like working with the drama of your portrait was unfolding in front of you. And there was Sargent. All that stuff. It was a bravura show for them, but it worked. It did the job, and of course he produced the paintings too.
They're all still looking a bit uncertain, so maybe I'll have one of those "here's one I made earlier" moments.
Might I just stop you right there and show you something that I did personally in this idiom to give you an idea, all right? Here's a portrait I did recently of a lady in Edwardian costume. And I don't want you to concentrate on the face, but what you can see is that the eye is drawn to the face because all the detail is there. What I want you to look at is the dress and the hat. Look at that. Job done. That's what I'm asking you to do now.
Did he use a knife at all?
Pository.
No, you do not use knives. We're not using palette knives. You can use your fingers. Of course you can use your fingers. All sensible artists use their fingers. Palette knives, it's very easy to make it look pathetic. And, you know, kind of touristy, Marbella 1956 type rubbish painting.
I wish I hadn't mentioned it.
Looking back, it's hard to believe I once almost gave up painting.
When I came out of prison, actually, I got no intention at all to do any more painting whatsoever. But it was the policeman who arrested me who called me up and said, you know, what are you doing? And why don't you do some more painting? And I said, oh, for goodness sake, you know, there's nothing but trouble. And he said, no, go on. Said, lots of people would be interested in what you do. So he commissioned a family portrait from me. And that's how I started off. And after that, he said, well, there's quite a few of these lawyers who are interested in, you know, in what you've done and would like a little memento of the case. And before I knew where I was, really, I got a business in painting fakes, I suppose, not forgeries, but fakes, which is legal, and they were signed on the back as well. John Myatt, Genuine Fakes. And good. Well, here's a painting by Claude Monet that I did earlier, as they say, back in 2003. And what I've done here is microchip the back of it. I have a friend who lives locally who puts these AVID chips on the back, plus a little leaflet which actually identifies that chip to these numbers. If you want to remove that chip, what you've got to do is cut a hole in the canvas, because it wouldn't come off otherwise. And that is one way of
of establishing the identity, as well as, of course, of signing it here, John Myatt, Genuine Fakes 2003. So I go to quite a bit of trouble now to make sure that they stay legit. Now I've gone straight, I really enjoy passing on my knowledge of painting to others.
I think it's probably, I'm just getting here too soon, but what eventually, when Gordon has applied this mid-tone in this vigorous way, bit more vigorous, that's the stuff. When you've applied that mid-tone in that vigorous way, then almost pure white, I think, don't you? Just a few places, just the highlights.
I covered the canvas with the dark brown and the ochre to start with, and left the figure sort of light. Immediately it felt more dramatic. So then when you've got the dark brown background, then you can block in the sort of more satiny feel about this lovely dress.
Essentially for me, the first thing was to get the figure to fit in the canvas as per Sargent's example. So I guess I just went straight for paintbrush, drafted it out quite loosely, and I've sort of blocked it in using the block painting technique, as John mentioned. And now I'm fiddling, and I just hope I don't fiddle too much and wreck it.
After moving to England, Sargent continued in his role as a prolific society painter, painting approximately 15 to 25 commissions each year and charging 2,000 guineas each time. That's over £150,000 each portrait in today's money. In fact, you were nobody unless Sargent had taken your likeness. Poets, presidents, industrialists all came to Sargent's studio. He was offered a knighthood by King Edward VII. But he turned it down because it would have meant giving up his American citizenship.
Turning down this honour did nothing to undermine Sargent's popularity in Britain. Society beauties like Nancy Astor still sought out the flattery of his brush, and if we examine the painting carefully, we can see why.
Can I draw your attention, all of you now, to the edges? Every transition here, as we go up, is a transition between really not a very adventurous transition. The tones are quite similar here. Here, the outline is almost broken. Here, dark against not quite so dark. And then we get a whole shadow area coming into the brown, and the brown bleeding back in until we come up to the shoulder. And that's where the whole drama of the outline changes. We've got light against dark. Look what happens when we get to the face, though. Look what he's done here. He's softened that edge right out. Right out. It's actually quite dramatically turned, isn't it? That's what makes this a professional piece of work. Find the edge of your work now, and if you can, particularly when we get up here, just soften slightly with your fingers, by just rubbing in ever so slightly, just softening the edge. And then at another point, harden it up.
Well, she started well enough, but I think Pat needs a bit of guidance now.
Don't dab too much, just put it on once and leave it, okay? And then this quite a strong cheekbone, particularly this movement over here, just a lovely strong highlight just there. Just. Okay, leave that now. Well, Pat, Gordon and Sally, I think it's just about time that we started looking at the model's face and working the detail into that face. Sargent was once asked, how did he manage to get such a good likeness? Now, what he said doesn't make too much sense to me, but for what it's worth, I'll tell you what he said. He said, if you get the shape of the skull, if you get the shape of the head, don't worry about the eyes, the nose, and the mouth. If you get the shape, look for the shape of the skull. Look for the unique shape of Sarah's skull. Cheekbones here, obviously she's got quite defined cheekbones. If you take this distance between here and here, the pupils will be roughly halfway between those two. And then the root of the nose here will be roughly halfway between the pupils and the chin, and the line of the lips and the mouth halfway again between the root of the nose and the tip of the chin. So all the action takes place really here. The likeness is defined here. not here, although this constitutes half of the whole face. So what he's saying is, look for the skull, find the skull, the shape of the skull, and then everything else will just drop into place. Now, I've tried it, and it doesn't work for me, but I pass it on to you because it might work for you.
It's difficult to get the flesh tones right. That lovely face colour that she's got, which is sort of tanned, but not too tanned. And at the moment, it looks a bit muddy. So I've got to breathe a bit of life into it.
Well, what I normally do is much, much bigger. I don't do little paintings at all. So this is, you know, fiddly.
That's it, Sally. Good idea. Lovely. It just turns it away from you.
Yeah. The face is too bright at the moment.
It is slightly, isn't it? Yeah. What you've got, Sally, is a dark moment here as the eye, kind of, the nose plunges in here, and then you've got the kind of the sphere of the eye, and right the way down the side of the nose here, you've got dark moments all the way down. Don't ever make the mistake of making the whites of the eyes white. They're just not. By far the lightest moment on this face, I think, is this highlight, and if we have to have a highlight, it's here, on those pearls. Here, I think, maybe here, the light here, the tone value here, is lighter than the whites of her eyes. That actually, in black and white, is a lighter moment here over the top of the eye, that lovely sort of shape there, as the skull kind of curves under for the eye socket. That is lighter than those. There's a tiny spot, a tiny highlight in the white of the eye, but that's it. But knock it right back. Despite his fame, Sargent was an intensely private person. He never married. He travelled the world in the company of his valet, and at other times with his two sisters and their families in tow. There were rumours of homosexuality, but since all his private papers were destroyed in 1925 after his death, we will never know. And frankly, it doesn't matter one way or the other, because it doesn't affect the legacy that he left behind. He was the Edwardian Society portrait painter.
I'd be thrilled if any of today's students could come even close to a 21st century Sargent. But some of us have still got a way to go.
The trouble here, Pat, is that these... You see, all the skin tones are actually... You've got them lighter than the lightest point on the dress.
Yes.
Now, if I... come with me and squint at her, right? Let's just do a squint. The lightest part, the very, very lightest thing I can see, the lightest thing I can see is here. From where you are, this is light, okay? There's nowhere on this face which is brighter than that.
Okay.
Look at the skin colours you've got.
Yeah.
You're giving me tones which is explosive. And that is a kind of... puts a hint of amateurishness in.
Oh.
You've got to get your tone values right.
I hope I'm not being too hard on her, but tone values is what it's all about.
Today has been a real challenge for my three students to emulate in just one day one of the greatest portrait artists of all time. Well, it's quite a challenge, isn't it? Let's see if any of them have managed to capture the Sargent magic on canvas. Right, thank you very much, everybody. You've all done extremely well. Brushes down, if you will, please, and let's have a look at what we've got.
I'm really hopeful that they've all done the master proud.
Right, here we go, Gordon. You're painting in a lovely frame. You ready? What do you think?
What do I think? Well, it's a nice frame. It sits in there nicely, colour match. It doesn't look too bad. I tried to do what you said. I wasn't trying to do a picture like I normally do. I was trying to do it in a Sargent-esque manner.
Yes.
So, like in the head, I did literally paint the skull.
I think this would pass for a studio sketch. If I was Sargent, or if you were a portrait painter, what I'd do is I'd sit the model down and I'd think, OK, we'll just play with this for a few hours, and this is the kind of work that he'd come up with. And then, OK, he'll take the further 2 weeks to do the completed job. But no, it's a wonderful attempt. Very good.
I would have liked to have felt like Sargent painting his easel, but it was just a little bit too small to get the old, you know, fancy strokes on.
Pat, you're painting in a gilt frame. Here we go. What do you think?
I'm not displeased with it. I don't think it's the slightest bit like Singer Sargent.
You made a very good start, actually.
I
you were
like
in
the
there
start,
with the,
yes.
brushing away, weren't you?
Well, that's what I love. But
Yeah.
then subsequently I realised that I probably was going away from what you actually were suggesting.
This could do with glazing down. The tones are not, you know, this rather peculiar beetroot colour. So we should lose as soon as we could. Look at these edges here. This edge is a single journey all the way line. If this was a Sargent, it wouldn't be.
No.
Things like that are what distinguish the amateur from the professional. It's just what you do with your edges. And by professional, I mean early 20th century professional, academic painting. What you went to school to learn in an academy was how to handle your edges.
When I've got at home in working on something else, I shall be able to rethink today what you said, and I shall use it. Thank you, John.
Thank you, Pat.
I sort of overworked it in that I went over the exciting bits that were there in the first place, and probably made it a bit too fiddly.
So, Sally, like the other two students, you've worked very hard today. Let's see your painting in a gold frame. What do you think?
I'm quite pleased with my end result.
Where would you say the success of this work is, really?
Possibly working at speed, surprisingly. I didn't think I was going to get it done, but I felt I worked pretty quickly and captured the dress and I guess the proportion.
I love the way you've got this white highlight here. That's just lovely. You have played with the edges. As we go down the edge, we can at least have some kind of enjoyment of something soft happening here, down here, and suddenly dark meets light and we've got a bit of drama going down here and again up here, where we've got a hard edge turning into a soft one. That is what I was hoping to see, and that is classic technique, if you like, what you do with the edge. Well done anyway. Congratulations, and thank you very much, all of you.
I felt sort of quite refreshed trying out some of Sargent's brush marks, but I wouldn't say my lunges were particularly successful.
Well, it's been quite a day. Gordon's had an amazing success for a self-taught artist. Pat got off to a great start. But for me, of the three, Sally has got the closest to realising a Sargent. As to which is the best painting, well, that's for you to decide.
I am so proud of my three students today. They have taken on someone with all the natural ability of a Mozart, an Einstein, or a Picasso. And they've managed to capture some of that poise and elegance of the grand master of Edwardian portraiture himself, John Singer Sargent.